We did it. We're on. Let's go ahead and dive in. So, we have had a bunch of questions inside the Millionaires in Medicine Club about all sorts of personal finance related topics, everything from student loan strategy to real estate investing to stock bond investing and more. The club's grown quickly. We are up to 2,200 and some members, which is exciting. And y'all have questions. So here we are. I'm just going to run through them. I have a whole list and I'm just going to take questions one by one. Now, if you're not already in the club and you're like, hey, I want to ask questions and get them answered, it's free. It's super easy. You can just go to strivewithkristen.com/community. The link's also in my Instagram bio, but strivewithkristen.com/community. You can join. It's totally free. And so you can ask questions. There's a forum. But then you also get invites to live events. So twice a month, we actually pay financial industry experts to come in and teach all the stuff you should have learned in school, which is funny. Our community is hosted in a platform called School. And I laugh because it's like, this is our school for money. So we'll have like financial advisors come in, CPAs come in, real estate investors, attorneys to just teach you all the stuff that we should have learned already. All right. So let's go ahead, dive in, answer some of these questions. Okay. Let's see. Hey, everyone. I'm in the process of starting to invest in real estate, currently taking a course, have some questions about getting the business up and running. Do you have experience with LTR, STR, or both? Long-term rental, short-term rental, or both? Do you purchase turnkey? I have no experience with rehabs. I'm nervous to dive into that when all of this is new to me in general. However, I recognize forced appreciation. Also, did you use a registered agent for your LLC? So this is a good question from Chelsea. She's a PA. There's actually a lot of layers to this question. So I'll say from a personal standpoint, I have familiarity with short-term rentals and private equity syndications and large multifamily. And in my experience, most people that purchase long-term rentals do not purchase turnkey. They really lean into the forced appreciation that comes from the value add and the rehab. Short-term rentals varies, but it's much more likely that you'll purchase turnkey. That being said, that doesn't negate the cost, the startup costs in the short-term rental world, because you have to stage the property. And so I wouldn't shy away either way. With the forced appreciation from a rehab on a long-term rental, you don't have to know anything to do that, is the thing. All you have to do is in your due diligence period between you getting it under contract and you actually closing, you would have multiple contractors ideally bid the job for you. And so I don't know the first thing about a rehab, but I've done a bunch of rehabs, either investment properties or my primary residence, and I know contractors. And so that's what you do is you find people you can trust that will bid the job and make sure you have an accurate number before close. Where people get into issues is when they haven't done that due diligence before close. They think, oh, this will be a $15,000 renovation. Plug that in all of their numbers and projections. Turns out it's 45 grand. And then they're like, oh, shoot, our cash flow shot. We didn't have this much cash ready to go. And it creates a tricky situation. Now, we've done some minor renos in our short-term rentals, but a lot of the cost comes from staging the property. So it depends on the level of stage you do. You have to recognize if you plan to charge premium prices on Airbnb for a luxury vacation rental, you cannot put IKEA furniture in it, right? If you're going to be a low to mid-tier vacation rental, then maybe you can. So the cost of stage will vary. I would say the absolute low end would probably be 20,000. But if you're doing a luxury vacation rental, you may spend 100,000 or more in the stage. So again, not that that's rehab, but it is upfront cost that you should figure into your investment calculations. The last question was, did you use a company for your registered agent for your LLC? So she's essentially asking, A, do you hold an LLC? The answer to that for me is always yes. I think the real estate investors you'll find that don't hold their investments in legal entities are real estate investors without any assets, to be frank. They're people that didn't put a lot of money into the deal and don't have a lot to lose outside of that. And so for those people, it might seem like no big deal, right? To not have your money in an entity, but or not have your property in an entity. But for people with assets, you will hold it in an LLC. Almost any asset protection attorney will tell you that. And you need a registered agent for any LLC for any purpose. For us, oh, sorry, my dog just went nuts. For us, our LLCs, goodness, are all formed by the same asset protection attorney company, and we have them serve as our registered agent. Now, at the very beginning, I actually did one completely by myself, and then I used like InkFile for one and used a registered agent service online. You actually pay more on an annual basis that way. Typically, if you're using the same attorney, they're going to give you a discount on your registered agent fee compared to like a random company online, but it is an option to do that. And so if you don't have an attorney in your corner, you plan to create the entity on your own, you could technically find something online and do it that way. All right, so that was a good question. Let's see what's next. This is a long post about someone in our community actually purchased their first short-term rental, which is very exciting. She shared the good, bad, the ugly. There's always ugly. I laughed a little bit because I'm like, I've been there, done that. That's all part of it. It makes you strong. We literally were robbed at one point. And so in our first short-term rental, it's like the nature of the beast. Okay, question. This says a PA. Has anyone left clinical practice for pharmaceutical sales or an MSL role? What was your experience like, and how high was the income potential? So I will tell you that while I haven't held an MSL role myself, I have plenty of professional contacts that are MSLs, and I've actually just applied an interview just to get familiar with the process of that side of medicine. I had previous experience speaking for a pharmaceutical company, and so it kind of just piqued my interest in that world. The income potential is way higher, like undoubtedly, yes. In addition to that, there are pros and cons, but there does tend to be more flexibility. The job itself is structured very differently. Your travel for an MSL position will be widely variable. I mean, I know MSLs that travel all of the time and spend, like one told me, like 180 nights in a year in a hotel. But then I also know MSLs who said, I almost never travel by plane. Almost all my travel is drivable. I'm back in bed every single night, with the exception of like once per month. Do I have an overnight or an airplane travel or the few conferences I go to a year? And so that part varies really widely based on the structure. I will say they're hard jobs to get because if you think about it, any seasoned medical professional probably has some level of burnout, right? So you have on the table this really high paying, really flexible job. Of course, a lot of people want them. And so you will have to very intentionally make yourself a high quality candidate. And the likely timeline is at least 12 months to get a position. So if that's what you're thinking, you're like, I think I'm kind of done with clinical medicine. If you can start leaning into networking now for MSLs in your clinical niche, expect 12 months, but you may well get something. Um, it's a pretty cush gig. And then she said, as a follow-up question, I've heard that if you become an MSL, you have to give up your license. Not sure if that's true. It's not. As a matter of fact, I also know PAs who have become MSLs and then said, hey, actually, I don't love this, and went back to clinical practice. So that's an option. You don't have to give up your license. It's different. The reason they didn't like it was because they felt like as a clinician, people are coming to you. And as an MSL, you have to like put yourself out and go to others. They didn't like that flip. They like to be the one people come to. And so different strokes for different folks, but that was the thought process there. You guys have any questions that are live about pharmaceutical positions, about short-term rentals, long-term rentals, real estate stuff? Anything at all? If you do, drop them in the chat and we'll try and get them answered. All right. Let's see what else we've got here. Okay, help. I am an RN in California. Let me see. I earn $55 an hour working at an infusion clinic. We have $1,400 a month payment in personal loan debt that totals 35K. Our rent is 28% of our monthly income at 2,400. My wife and I have 2 kids, another one on the way in July. We were thinking if we moved to a low cost of living area, life would be a little easier. Is anyone from Arizona, Texas, or Tennessee? We were thinking about moving to one of these states. Grateful for any advice. So when I look at this, there's a couple of things that come to mind. One, they did not tell me, I'll have to get out my calculator here. They did not tell me if the 28% of monthly income at 2,400, if that is gross or if that is net, or if that is, net. So let me just do some math here. Yeah, that's 28% of gross. Because if you rent out $55 an hour times about 2,080 hours a year, that's our gross annual salary. So that rent is probably 28% of gross. So a really important rule of thumb is to try to keep all housing expenses, whether it's rent or mortgage, including principal payment, taxes, insurance, HOA, all of that less than 20% of gross income. It's actually pretty hard to do, but it's key in avoiding the situation where you feel like you cannot possibly get ahead. And so I would start by trying to figure out a way to get gross housing expenses less than 20%. That's in places like California. It's hard to do, but there are solutions. We've had medical professionals do really well with house hacking, where they'll purchase like a triplex, for example, live in one unit, rent out 2 others. In places like where I live in Indiana, that would cover your rent, right? Or all of your overhead. In California, it won't, but it'll get your numbers less than that 20%. If you're thinking of moving, then buying's probably not the solution, but a house hack could be the answer there. The other potential is finding some way to like split living space with someone, but it would be tricky with 2 adults and 3 kids, to be frank, to do that. That's one side. You can always change the equation by increasing income. And I would have to know where in California, but what I like to do is look up local salary data for specific credentials or subspecialties on salary.com, ZipRecruiter, for example, and figure out, okay, where do I fall on the bell curve? I think really it should be everyone's goal, if you're an intentional person with money, to push towards that 75th percentile of income. And if you're way below that, that's going to create that feeling of like not being able to get ahead. The other piece of that is not all of those bell curves actually accommodate a local region's cost of living index factor. And so you really have to look at that and go, okay, let's say I live in Denver. It's a great example of a city that doesn't. Let's say I live in Denver and I'm looking at, okay, I'm the 50th percentile in income, so I feel like I'm doing pretty well. But if I compare the buying power in Denver at that salary to somewhere like in Illinois, for example, you end up seeing that actually being at the 50th percentile in Denver is like being at the 30th percentile somewhere else in the Midwest or somewhere cheaper. And so in those types of places, if you really want to get ahead with money, you have to negotiate your way to the 75th percentile or above, because otherwise you can't accommodate the cost of living index. And so that's the other piece to keep in mind too. Now, I can't say anything specific to living in Arizona, Texas, or Tennessee. But there's two different sides of the coin to fix the problem. The personal loan, I would guess, is probably high interest debt and is probably massively worsening the situation. Most personal loans, the interest rates exceed 10%. And that's going to be the thing that makes the rest of the math not math, that you have that payment there. That needs to be cleared really aggressively because it's going to be a huge deterrent to building wealth, but it's going to be tricky to clear it fast without really increasing income if all of your overhead stays what it is. That's Sean. Good luck to Sean. All right, let's see. Okay, so Justina asked, for those doing the short-term rental tax loophole, how helpful did you find it in reducing your tax? How much time did you have to put into it, especially in the first 3 years? Would you do it all over again? Did anyone help you through the process? Yeah, good question. So if you're not familiar, the short-term rental tax loophole is a way to allow paper losses from your short-term rental to massively reduce your taxable income. I've done it twice, 2 different properties, 2 different years, saved probably $100,000 in taxes. It's a huge tax saving mechanism. Huge tax saving mechanism. So if the question is, will it save you money? The answer is probably 1,000%. Yes. Especially the more expensive a property you buy, the more it saves you. Now, the other layer of those questions were how much time was it? And was it worth it? Would you do it again? So the time you have to meet specific criteria. You have to be able to prove material participation. It typically means you have to self-manage your property. Getting that all set up takes a lot of work, like setting up the email sequences, setting up your automations, getting your cleaners, getting your boots on the ground. That takes a lot of work. Once it's done, you can get really efficient. If you are someone who will lean into system, you can make it pretty darn fast. So like I'm a systems person, and so if it can be automated, I will automate it. If there is a way to use like Zapier or some type of technology base to say if this, then that, if this books, notify the cleaner automatically, those things to remove yourself from the equation so you're not taxing your cleaner, you're not, you can find ways to make the system really streamlined and efficient. But it is work, right? And you do have to track hours. And so I don't look at it in terms of how much time did it cost. I look at it in terms of what did I get paid for those hours. So if I saved, let's just make it even though it wasn't. Let's say I saved $50,000 in tax in the first year, $50,000 in the second year. And I worked, technically, there's specific rules for material participation, but let's say I worked 250 hours on that. So let's do the math. We'll say, all right, 50,000 divided by 250 hours, I got paid $200 an hour to do that. Now, for a lot of medical professionals, that's more than you make it work. So I wouldn't say, oh, is it too much work, not enough work? The question is, what do you get for it? And if you earn $200 an hour for the hours that you spend, I would say that that's worth it, unless at your day job you make $500 an hour, then it's not, right? So I think about it that way. But it is very, very doable. I mean, we both work full time, have small children. I also have a business, and we did it. So it's possible, it's doable. You have to be willing to lean into systems for the execution. All right, let's see. Okay. So, hi, looking to open a high yield savings account. From my research, Ally and SoFi have really high APYs, and I can't really see any major differences between the two, except for SoFi is offering a cash bonus. What do you guys think about them? Well, I'll say a couple different things. One, someone commented and said, actually, Wealthfront has slightly higher right now for their APY than Ally and SoFi. There you go. And let's see if anyone else had any thoughts on that. No. So in my opinion, you want to really avoid making a mountain out of a molehill. And a high yield savings account is a molehill. Like you should use one. Why would you not? You can earn at least in this interest rate environment, at least 3.5, 4.5% on your money for doing nothing. It takes 15 minutes to open it. And so again, if you calculate, okay, if I take my, $10,000 emergency fund and I go put it in a high yield savings account and I earn 4% in the year, well, then how much did I just earn compared to the 15 minutes I spent? It's a very high time per or ROI per time spent activity. But the more you drag it out, the process of getting one open, the lower and lower the return on investment is. And really, your focus should not be on high yield savings accounts. It should be on things that actually build wealth. And so, in my opinion, is choose one that you can access your money quickly if needed, that is FDIC insured. Keep your total amount under the FDIC insurance limit, which is $250,000 a person, and roll with it. Like NerdWallet and all of those companies post blogs every year of like the top 5. And if you look, the same ones are on the list over and over and over again. Like SoFi's on it, Ally's on it, Goldman Sachs is usually on it, Wealthfront's on it. So it's like those high yield savings accounts have been around a long time. They're consistent, and the likelihood of you having an issue is very, very low. For me, like some of them offer introductory APY bonuses and stuff. I don't even worry about that because it just feels like a negligible amount of money. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they are going to come close to leveling out. As interest rate environments vary, as introductory bonuses go away, they'll all kind of shift back towards the baseline. So I think they're both solid options. Ally does have a buckets option that you can organize your funds online. So if you have like your emergency fund, sinking fund for a car down payment, sinking fund for a vacation, you can separate it all out electronically in the same account, which is nice. It just keeps everything simple. All right. Best travel credit card. What do you have? What do you prefer? All right. So I'll share mine, but then I'm going to go ahead and read some comments here too. A lot of people are saying Chase and Capital One. I wait for a good sign-on bonus. I've done American Airlines and Southwest, so they're doing actual airline cards. Someone said I have the Amex Plat due to the sign-on bonus. Okay, yeah. So, and obviously, that card has a pretty high annual fee, so you have to make sure you're a pretty savvy point user and get your value. Honestly, I'm a big Chase fan. So from a personal standpoint, I have the Chase Sapphire Preferred, and then I have a couple of different Chase business cards as well. The thing I like about Chase is that you can almost always, with few exceptions, you can combine the points from different cards. So I can almost always combine my business points with my personal points. You can buy stuff in the Chase Travel portal, which I will say isn't the worst. It's pretty user-friendly. You just have to check your pricing because sometimes it's not the best value way to do it. But you can also transfer points to all of their partners. And so like you can transfer points to Hyatt. You can transfer points to anywhere. Like when we went to Disney, we transferred Chase points to Southwest and booked Southwest flights. When we just went on a baby moon to the Cayman Islands, our hotel was a Mr. and Mrs. Smith hotel, which is like a small boutique hotel chain, but they're owned by Hyatt. And so we transferred Chase points to Hyatt and got that hotel with the most value way. I've also, again, just booked stuff through the Chase travel portal when it didn't look like it was going to change the value I would receive for the points. Of course, you can do cash back and all sorts of other stuff, but from a travel standpoint, I've actually found it to be pretty flexible and user-friendly, and all of my annual fees are less than $100 or $100 or under. And so if you're someone who's not sure that you're going to be an excellent user of points, I would steer clear of getting a card out of the gate with a $500 annual fee or something like that, where you just end up like, hopefully this is worth it, and get this very expensive card. Now, if you guys have any other thoughts on that, yeah, feel free to share them in the comments, drop them in the chat. Also, guys, if you want to actually ask questions, just join the Millionaires Medicine Club. If you weren't on here when I said that at the beginning, it's totally free. strivewithkristen.com/community. Millionaires in Medicine Club, 2,200 members, totally free. You can just ask away and get a bunch of help from a bunch of different folks. So if you're not in there yet, hop in there. Free resource. Why not take advantage? Good question here. Doctoral degree for PAs. Hey, has anyone thought about doing this? If you have, has it broadened your career opportunities or increased your pay? All right. See what we got. Well, I had to put in my 2 cents. Okay. So the data for PAs getting that doctoral degree sucks in terms of income. There's actually data, I think this is 2023 data, PAs with a doctorate versus master's, the salary increase was 2.36%. Now for NPs, it's 7.7%. And so you're like, yeah, the data just says that NPs get compensated more for it and we don't. I have precepted, honestly, a lot of students getting it right out of school because a lot of PA programs, master's PA programs that have a doctoral degree at the university, they'll offer a benefit where if you go right away into it, it is substantially cost reduced. Of course, it's easier to get an ROI when the cost is $10,000 versus $100,000, right? So I think about that way. I think about everything in terms of ROI. Like, if I'm going to spend my time and money, what am I going to get for it? And if the answer is a fat load of nothing, then I'm not going to do it. But there are certain areas that it's actually pretty beneficial to have, one of which is leadership, hospital administration, and some pharmaceutical industry roles do prioritize people with doctoral level degrees over people with masters. Now, is that always true? Less and less so. More recently, for pharma roles in particular, they're leaning into your clinical expertise. But if you have a doctoral level degree, it does maybe reduce the likelihood you get screened out by their HR people or their AI algorithms that are going through applications. So here's a comment. This is from someone, a PA that's getting it. He said, I'm doing it because he thinks that the profession will shift towards more advanced degrees. Company paid for it. So that changes the ROI massively, right? If your company's paying for it, your only output is time, not money. And so then it's way different from a justification standpoint. His company also increases pay for every additional credential. And then he mentioned the same thing I just said. Some more options in terms of industry, pharmaceuticals, academia, etc. So I think that's really helpful. He has a tuition reimbursement program at his company if you have something like that, or you can get a very reduced doctoral level degree in terms of price through going like right after a program. I think those are the instances when the value is probably there. But like for me to go back to my alma mater and go get a random doctoral degree and spend multiple tens of thousands of dollars wouldn't make sense for me right now. The return on investment would be negligible. And so that's not something I would do in my position, but there's always pros and cons. I'm no longer qualified to answer this one. Someone said PA study resources for, oh, this is for practice updates. I thought it was for the PANS. I'm like, I took the PANS like 10 years ago. I'm more up on the PAN-RE. So anyways, for general setting and practice updates, online sites or applications you recommend. We'll cover this quickly and get back to the money stuff. I use UpToDate for everything. I'm on UpToDate all of the time. I think it's the most valuable resource. I read JAPA and some other things, but I find them to be less clinically useful for me because I work in a subspecialty. And so I honestly rely pretty heavily on my group internally sharing articles and new peer-reviewed journals when something has changed or a new clinical practice guideline comes up. That's kind of how I stay in the loop. I don't have any really good apps for that. That's a great question. Okay, this is a good question from Michael. Hey, new to the group, mountain of student loan debt, grace period just ended. I have a high yield savings account. What else should I be doing? Oh, that's a good question. So the first thing that you should be doing, Michael, is figuring out simultaneously your student loan strategy and your investing system. Those two things have to be done together. If you want to make massive money mistakes, do one without the other. It doesn't work. If you set up your investing system, you think you know what you're going to do, you get your Roth IRA, you get all this stuff, then you figure out, oh, this is my student loan strategy. Oh, I'm married. Oh, I should be married filing separately. Oh, I can't even use Roth IRAs. Oops, I made all these contributions. I have to go and undo it. And so you have to do it together. And saying, like, I'm going to pay off my loans in 3 years, that's not a strategy. When we do student loan strategy for people, if you were actually in our 90-day coaching program, we have a table, and the table says public service loan forgiveness with this tax filing status, public service loan forgiveness with this tax filing status, taxable loan forgiveness, same thing, accelerated payment plan, options 1, 2, standard repayment plan over 10 years. And it has the monthly payment, the total cost of student loan repayment, which I think is the most important number, the total amount forgiven at the end, if anything will be forgiven, and the total amount of tax due with the forgiveness, assuming that it's taxable forgiveness, right? And so when you decide your student loan strategy, it's not just like, oh, well, what's the cheapest payment or what's the most I can pay, depending on what you have in mind, right? Like it's an actual real strategy where you're trying to figure out what is the absolute lowest I can pay back on these bad boys and get rid of them. And the only way to do that is to understand the options available to you and actually do the math. So you should have that. And then from an investing system standpoint, you have to pair that with your student loan strategy because there are a lot of student loan strategies that rely heavily on investing to maximize the student loan piece. And so if you're doing one without the other, you're messing it up. That's why people ask all the time, like I'll get a message, hey, how much money should I put in my Roth IRA this year? And it's like, you're asking question 11. You haven't asked or answered questions 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Like all the other things. What are you doing for your student loans? What financial independence timeline are you on? Are you going to retire at 65? Do you want to reduce hours early? Do you want to be able to go part-time? Do you want to be able to retire early? What's your nest egg goal? What's your timeline to get there? How much do you have to invest on an annual basis? What's your tax filing status? Do you need to lower your AGI for student loan reasons or does it not matter? Like there's so many other questions that have to be answered before you can say, how much do I put in my Roth IRA? But if you don't know that, then you fall into the trap. It's like, oh, it's like what we do in medicine, right? The whole you don't know what you don't know thing. Like if you're a student and you're like looking at a serum creatinine that's elevated, you're like, okay, well, this is an acute kidney injury. All I need to know is what the BUN is. And I'll be able to tell by that ratio, is it pre-renal? Is it not? And I'm a diagnostician. It's like, well, if that's the only question you know to ask, you're going to miss the acute interstitial nephritis 100% of the time, right? But if you, and that's again, this is just how money is. It's like the more you know to dive in, the more likely you arrive at a good result. If you only know 1 or 2 questions to ask, 1 or 2 levers to pull, you miss really big stuff and you're just totally none the wiser about it. It's kind of crazy. Okay, we'll take like one more question and then we'll call it quits. Okay, let's see what this got. Husband and I are thinking of starting a family soon. This is from Lydia. And so many people tell me to consider going part-time when the kids are young, but no one talks about the impacts of this on retirement and overall net worth. I work 13 to 14 shifts in the ED for reference. My husband is military. Childcare would also need to be considered. Love to get your thoughts on both sides. And this is such a good question. And I will tell you, a lot of our clients request this. Like we have a lot of people that work with us before they've had kids, and they literally say, I want to be able to reduce hours when I have small kids. And like that is a prime goal for them. Now, that being said, I've seen flip side, plenty of people who come to us and they've already done that, but they did it from a poor financial footing. They like had kids and they were like, whatever, I'm going part-time. They didn't have any cash reserves. They hadn't really addressed the higher level interest debt. They didn't have an investing system in place. They're already pretty behind. And then it's a really tough situation because it's like, well, it's going to be so hard for you to even catch up and just have a standard retirement and be able to retire at 65. And so I would say that as much as I would want to say, like, oh, this is everyone's right, I'm a mom. Of course, I want to say that. Um, it's you have to be really careful because you can create a disastrous situation by doing this. But if you plan for it, you can do it really well. We've had a lot of people that will position themselves to either drop to like a zero point 0.7 FTE or a zero point 0.5 FTE when they have small kids, which is a beautiful season of life to be able to do that. But it does require you really setting yourself up for that in advance. So if you know, like Lydia's planning ahead, she's already saying, hey, we want to do this. We're thinking about starting a family. Then it's like, okay, perfect. Now's the time to get the ducks in a row. Like you need to have the high interest debt gone. You need to have the emergency reserves. You need to make sure your overhead can sustain the lower income. So if you picked a mortgage that was taking up 25% of your gross, well, now you just dropped your hours. Now your mortgage is overwhelming, right? So you need to factor in that. And honestly, if you're not at least on track to retire just at 65, it's a hard move to make. But if you're able to come in, like what we help people do is front load their portfolio, really start building wealth early, make sure that all of those like ducks are in a row in terms of cash reserves, in terms of debt, in terms of insurance, like all of that stuff is in place. And so they do have the opportunity to reduce hours and they can actually still end up like most of our folks that do that are still on track to retire with like 4 million, 5 million, 6 million bucks. So it's not like they're going to be destitute in the future. They get the best of both worlds, but it's only by preemptive planning. It's really hard to go, well, I just found out I'm pregnant. I've got 8 months and well, I'm going to figure that out. So if you think that might be in your future, you haven't actually started the family planning process yet, lean in. Lean in. I mean, that's what I did. When we had kids, not right away, but I did drop to a zero point 0.7. And it's been awesome. But I also spent years getting ready to do that. And so we could do it really confidently without any concern that it was going to damage our long-term financial picture only because we front loaded our portfolio, we dealt with the debt, we had our cash reserves, we checked our overhead, all those things were in place first. So I hope that's helpful, Lydia. I would say, like, this is your window. Maximize the heck out of it because you won't get it back. And it is harder once you have kids to do this stuff. I will not even remotely tell you it's not possible because I work with clients every single day that do it with 3 kids in daycare and all the things. You can do it, but undoubtedly it is easier before because you have less expense. And so if you are in the before, please, please take serious advantage of it. Okay. Well, gosh, we've got a while here, so I'll wrap it up. Again, if you want to ask questions, we'll do this again. We'll probably do it in like another 3, 4 weeks. Join the Millionaires of Medicine Club, totally free. Strivewithkristen.com/community. You can get in. There's free content, free people to ask questions of, and 2,000 other folks, right, to hopefully weigh in on whatever you're facing financially. So I hope to see you in there. Hope this has been valuable, and have a good night.